Welcome to another episode of Health Your Way podcast, where we discuss health issues ranging from physical, mental, emotional, as well as current facts. Today's episode, we're discussing how toxic masculinity may impact your sexual health. Please allow me to introduce my guest today, Steffo Shambo. He's the founder of Tantric Academy of Sacred Sexuality. At the Academy, he hosts a mentorship program called the Tantric Man Experience. Did I get that right, Steffo?
Yeah, the Tantric Man Experience. Yes, I help men who struggle in their sexuality or love life to overcome those struggles. Yes. Thank you, Mo.
Thank you for coming. I know that you're all the way in Thailand, so this is a different time zone. So I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation with me. I don't think it happens often with men. So having an opportunity for you to share your knowledge means a lot to me, and I think a lot of people that are listening will feel the same way as well.
Yeah, I'm super passionate about this, and I'm happy that you are too and want to talk about this, because I think it's really, really important that we start to talk about it more, because it's not, and it needs to be addressed to so we can address it and deal with it.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I think in your own words, what does sexual health mean? And why is it important for men to be aware of their sexual health?
Mm-hmm. Because it's so extremely neglected in today's society. We don't get a sexual education, a proper one in school. It's just like STDs and condoms, but it's not like a real sexual education. So what we do is that men get conditioned through porn, right? So almost every man have watched porn, and they are conditioned to ejaculate quickly, to have performance anxiety, to compare themselves, but also to treat women maybe in a slightly negative way and objectifying women. And all these things causes us to have this conditioning, whether we like it or not, in our subconscious mind, and it's affecting our sexual health. We're not enjoying it as much as we could. We're not exploring it to the fullest. And since sexual energy is one of the foundation and fundamental energies of life, it's how we are being born into the world. It's how nature functions, right? It has so much, a tremendous power that lies in there. So if we don't address it and deal with it, we just lose all of that potential that is there. And that's why it's so important for men to work on their sexual health, because we work on our fitness health, on our diet, on our mental health, on our business health, and have coaches for all this. But the sexual aspect is neglected, and we think it's supposed to be natural to go and have, erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, disconnection with your spouse, and all these things, and because we don't address sexual health.
Honestly, while you're talking, I'm listening to what you're saying, and I'm just like, you're right. Like every other form of like health, like financial health, there's coaches out there. There's physical health. Like I don't really like. There are some sexual coaches, but it's not advertised. Like I don't see men going to unless they have some kind of issues, right? But they don't look at the spiritual aspects. They don't think of sex like that. And when you say that to me, I don't really ever see in my past experience relationship. I don't ever see men saying, let's talk about our sexual universal. Like it's not a conversation piece. So it's not funny, but like I'm just thinking of how disconnected we are when it comes to, you're saying our spiritual sexual health. And it's not, that was very powerful. Like that made a lot of sense to me. And sorry, in respect to our topic today, toxic masculinity, I know that, I guess, what does it really mean? Like, I guess I'm a little confused. What does it mean to you?
Yeah, so it's a very loaded term, right? Toxic masculinity. And some men kind of find it hard to even talk about it when we put it like that.
Okay.
So I would like maybe to just reframe it, maybe call it something else, because yeah, I can say toxic masculinity sometimes, but if I want to reach all men and to really have a conversation about this, I think maybe to talk about an unhealthy behaviors in men, because like gender cannot be toxic. It's not like all men are like this and all women are like that. That's not true, right? We have certain behaviors in men and women that can be toxic. So we cannot say a gender is toxic. And if we have toxic masculinity, there needs to be a polarity, and there's also something called toxic femininity, which is not talked as much about.
I'm
So
sorry,
if we
hold on,
just,
stop for a second. There's toxic femininity. I've never heard of that at all.
yeah, and most people haven't,
Okay,
because it's
sorry.
just focused on toxic masculinity, and toxic femininity would be more subtle things that are not really addressed in the mainstream. That's why we haven't heard about it. But I'm just saying both are there. Um, because there's always two polar opposites, right? So if we instead maybe talk about unhealthy behaviors in men or unhealthy masculinity, I like that word better. You know, it's just, it kind of like boils it down to what it actually is. And it's these unconscious patterns that are acted out in a negative way in people. It doesn't matter
Okay.
if it's women, men and women, but right now when we talk about this term, in men. So, what are those things? For example, this mask we put on as men, women have their mask, men have their own, right? So, usually what happens is that we have this shadow. It's called shadow, right? Carl Jung termed this coin. And these are the things that we hide about ourselves. Maybe in the schoolyard, we were bullied, or we said, or we were crying. We were 5, 7 years old, and then someone else came and said, you know, real men don't cry. And it really hurt that little boy. You know, he felt like, you know, he was just expressing his emotions. And then someone said, that's not the real man. And then he saw in, you know, the his heroes in the movies, how tough they were, you know, Clint Eastwood and the stone face, they didn't show any emotions at all. And so he slowly from an age start to develop this aversion towards the feminine, which is to feel emotions, to be expressive, to to have those qualities, right? To be vulnerable. And so he disassociated with them and suppressed them. And today they come out as maybe, you know, stonewalling, you know, in an argument, we're just trying to weather the storm instead of actually communicating how a man feels. So he just shuts down instead, or checking out, right? And disconnect with his partner. And so this can be one thing, or it can develop this mask of the tough guy, you know. It's a mask, but deep inside there's a vulnerable boy, right? But the tough guy is like, no, I'm not going to show any weakness, and you know, I'm gonna just power through everything. And he can come across as a jerk, or putting down women, or whatever, or being a macho man. You know, he think that he's supposed to be a certain way, because what we learn in porn, like we said before, in porn or in movies and things like that, is like, this is how a man should be like.
Okay.
So it's kind of, we're conditioned into a certain masculinity, which is false. And then men haven't done the work on the shadow to remove that, so that seeps out unconsciously.
Okay.
So that's where it's coming from. There's no boy or man that is born with a toxic behavior, right? It's something we learn and being conditioned to.
I like that. And going forward, I mean, I'm going to just address as a negative behavior because you're right. And there's a gender is not toxic. It's just somebody within that gender that's acting a certain way. And that's fair to say. I think to add that, you explained, I heard a lot that how does it affect men on the sexual health. So let's break it down really. I really want to say, for men, I heard how it breaks it down. How does it affect women then when men have negative behaviors? Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
Hmm.
I just, yeah, how does that?
Yeah. So for a woman, for example, she will not feel connected. If we say a woman with like a feminine essence, she wants to connect, she wants to share love, right? That's kind of one of the highest priorities. And so when the man is then stonewalling, or not in touch with his emotions because this is how he was programmed, he's not able to express that. So he thinks maybe he should just be silent, shut up until, the storm pass. And then, so the woman would then start to feel not connected, and that start to tear on the relationship or whatever it is, right? So if you go for too long in such a relationship, you will drift apart more and more and more, because the woman doesn't feel connected, and it needs to be there. So she feels she cannot be heard and seen by the man because he's not able to communicate that to her. So that depth is missing of the feminine heart, or just being want to be seen, heard, communicated to, and feel connection in the relationship. That's one
I,
thing.
I feel like you're talking to me, Steffo. I feel like you're talking to me right now. I wish I met you like a few years ago, because like when you said that, I'm listening to you and I can see that, sometimes as a woman, you want to have a conversation, you want to express your feelings, but the other individual at times is just you're right, stonewalling you, and then you do feel not good guy. You feel like you're not part of a relationship. You feel isolated. You feel lonely, and it's not a good feeling. And as a society, I'm wondering how does that affect us as a society if two people are not able to communicate? Like I think in your own experience, when people come to you, the relationships are being affected. And I'm not going to speak for you, but please, you let me know.
Mhm. hmm Well, on a global scale, I think this is just zoomed out, right? So what happens in close quarters that we don't talk about and we don't want to admit to our friends or whatever, or show to public, right? But I think it's just happening on a global scale. So I think man, woman in a marriage or in a relationship is kind of the higher, the divine feminine, the divine masculine on a global scale, something that has been going on throughout history. Patriarchy took over some time ago, and burning witches on the stake, and all these things in the past. But we still live in that. The hurt of the feminine and the hurt of the masculine is kind of still in like the egregore of the earth, I feel like. So it causing these conflicts now of maybe we can see in politics, in war, in environments,
It's fair.
the environment is getting worse and worse and all that stuff. And that's all feminine, right? If you think about it, it's nurturing, it's nature. So in that sense, it's kind of that it plays out just on a global scale. And so that's why it's so important to heal this, I feel, in ourselves, in our relationship, because then that can be reciprocated on a global scale. Because sometimes it's not just enough to just address it politically, we just have to address it within ourselves. So if everyone would do that, I feel we're getting closer to a solution.
I like how you put that. Then with that said, do you have one or two or three tips that you can say can help men and women that are experiencing negative behaviors from a specific gender?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult because in a relationship, if you start to become the other's therapist, it's kind of not the best idea, right? So we better have someone else who is the therapist and telling the other how they should be and not be, and pointing things out. So that can kind of not be the best idea. But, you know, the best is when you have your own realization, like, okay, I can see that the reflections I get from my environment and from my friends and from my spouse, there rings some truth in them, and I'm willing to take a look at it. Okay, so if
Okay.
the willingness is there, then there is possibility to do some work. Okay, so let's say that's the deal. Then I would say the number one thing is to start to look into the shadow. That shadow we talked about in the beginning, or where it's formed already in our early years, on the schoolyard, in the parents' home, in our peer groups, and all of that, right? So looking at what are our blind spots? what's in our subconscious mind, those automatic programs that keeps running there, and we think it's like fate or something, like an invisible force that is pulling us to sabotage and repeating the same problems again and again, and attracting the same kind of partner again and again, whatever it might be. But it's not. It's all just conditioning programs that can be changed. So the shadow work, I would say, is a very, very important part in this, to really heal those suppressed emotions for a man, for example, and like if he never was able to allow to feel those emotions, maybe they're still bottled up inside. So maybe that needs to be just felt for once. And I have seen so many adult men just cry out their boyhood tears, and after that was such a relief, like a being reborn, and so much lightness coming there, so much more openness being there after that. And this can really also start to look into, like, okay, what am I actually feeling? Start to be able to communicate that. Or like, what is my boundaries? Because boundaries is very important, not only for men but for women too. If you don't have clear boundaries, if I know my boundaries and you know your boundaries, and then we can set them and communicate about them. But if we don't know even what my boundaries are, I cannot communicate them, right? So those things are really important to know, so we can set clear boundaries in the relationship, and then we will feel much better about it. And because they're not stepped over, they're not trespassed, they're not broken. And if they are, then we can take proper measurement and point it out, right? And then you feel safe.
Honestly, I wish I met you a few years ago. I think a lot of people need to hear this. I think at an early age, and maybe in your 20s, or even when you start dating, a lot of men and women need to have this kind of conversation that we're having. The reason why I say this is I see a pattern. Like, if you don't know yourself, if you don't take personal accountability of what you've done and what affects you, you don't know how to treat somebody, or how that other person should treat you, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's, at my age now, I've learned that through trial and error. And you have to, as you mentioned, you have to also take self realization of what is your negative, I guess, negative aspects that attracts you to other people that may not be good for you, and what are you doing. So I
Mm-hmm.
really like what you're saying. With that
Yeah.
said, there's so much information out there, but honestly, I don't think there's enough information about what you're talking about. I really don't. Um, for people that are interested in, what you're saying, wanting that experience, right, and wanting to come out of that norm, and what are your suggestions to help them come out of that norm? Like, I know you have that program, so give us a little more information if you don't mind.
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. There is a lack of these kind of teachings and help for men out there. More and more is there's way more for women and women's empowerment, which is great. I really love that, support that, so important. But it's time also to give some to the men as well. It's really needed, so we can just heal between men and women, and also between the feminine and masculine globally. And I think this can really bring peace to the world. So that's my mission with my program that I have, my online mentorship program for men. It's kind of like an initiation process from boyhood to manhood, and mastering your sexual health. But not only that, because that's the foundation, and from that you can run your business. You have so much energy just to crush it in anything, or even in fitness. There's more energy to execute your physical health or mental health. So yeah, I really feel that is the key to unlock the full potential in life. So that's what I do at tantricacademy.com. That's my website. So there's more resources there, some free articles, some free trainings as well.
And you mentioned, so I think you just gave us your website in respects to how to reach you. Do you have any other social media platforms that you want to tell anybody that's currently watching or listening?
Mm. I mean, that's my best platform is my website. Otherwise, I'm on YouTube as well a little bit. I'm a little bit on Facebook. Oh well, that's my second best thing. On Facebook, I have a group, but it's only for men. So sorry, all women out there. It's called the Tantric Brotherhood. So if anyone wants to join that, otherwise on YouTube is Tantric Academy as well. Yeah.
Oh, I like that. The brotherhood, what I like that. I think, and for a lot of our viewers, when reaching out to you, what sets you apart from others in your own realm?
Yeah,
Oh,
because I focus on transformation. There's
okay.
just tons and millions of things that are informational on online, right? You know, and we read books. Everyone has Google, and we watching YouTube videos. But why is that some people are still stuck and struggling, right? Because there's not a problem with information. We all are equal on that. We all have Google at our fingertips. So what is different? Is the transformation, right? You can read a book, it's great, but will it transform your life? I don't know, maybe not, right? But that's why I'm focusing on that. I'm focusing on giving men an experience of transformation. They don't have to believe in what I tell them or what I teach, because they notice it in their body, in their relationship, in their mind, in their life. And that's something they can believe in. That's why it's so different from anything else. And honestly, I haven't seen anything offered like this for men when it comes
Yeah.
also including sexuality and shadow work and all that stuff. So yeah, I'm really proud and really honored to do this work, and I just see how this can really change a lot of relationships, one man at a time.
Honestly, you're right. I don't see anybody doing this, and even then, it's not publicized. Because when I researched you and I looked you up, I was really, lack of better choice of word, dumbfounded, because you had so much, and then I saw you on IG, and I was like, this is what people need. Like people really, like certain men need this, and okay, we talk about the negative behavior of men. There's some men that don't know how to behave, period. I've experienced, like, there's some men that don't have social skills or understand what is needed to communicate
Hmm.
or connect with other men. If you're watching this or listening to this, please go visit him. Okay, there's certain cues of society that you shouldn't behave. You should not insult women or think they're, again, you said porn. Porn's a good indicator of what men think is normal, right? So I'm
Hmm.
talking too much, but
It's terrible. It's
yeah.
conditioning us. And even though we don't want to believe it, and it's like, I just watch once in a while. But, you know, it's really bad porn.
Yeah,
I have a whole article about that. So go and read it. So you will see for yourself, guys.
is what I'm actually gonna do. Like, is I would like to bring you back on the for porn on the male side, because I do have one coming up for the women's side. If you're open to it, I think it's good to have that different viewpoint on the male side and how it affects male than from a woman's side. So with that said, I really want to say thank you for taking the time to have this conversation with me. By far, one of the few episodes that I'm just like, yes, you're talking to me, and then you're talking to me from like when I was in the 20s and 90s, and a lot, like even a lot of men. I'm thinking my own siblings, like they need this kind of conversation. So yes, thank you, really.
100%. Thank you so much for having me, Mo. It was great to talk to you.
Thank you for joining us today on our weekly episode of Health Your Way podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, share with others, and please feel free to comment below and ask any questions on topics we discussed, as well as future topics you'd like to hear about. Have a happy and healthy week, and be sure to tune in next week for the next episode on our Health Your Way podcast.